Welcome back to another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. My name is Patrick Lyons. I'm one of your hosts, and I'm here with my esteemed colleagues and friends and fellow co-hosts, Patsy Feeman and Leb Tannenbaum. Patsy, how are you today?
I'm delighted to have AK joining us today.
I know, me too.
Wow.
And Leb, how are you, sir?
Happy to be here. Happy AK's here, and looking forward to this.
Yeah, likewise. So listener, the AK that Leb and Patsy are referring to is our guest for today. Our guest is Coach AK Ikwuakor. Coach AK, Coach, you're a former professional athlete turned entrepreneur and performance coach. And for the past 15 years, you've worked with over 40,000 students, athletes, and business leaders around the world to improve performance on and off the field. I know from speaking with you and from seeing your work out there, you're a keynote speaker with Dear World. You've served as CEO, helping early stage startups scale their businesses in 90 days. I enjoyed, Patsy was telling me before you joined, Patsy said she went out to check out your morning podcast. So listeners, called Mornings with Coach AK. And 2 hours later, I realized that she had just listened to a whole bunch of them similar. They're nice 3 to 5 minute, easily consumable, highly recommended. So you are the host of the podcast Mornings with Coach AK.
Thank you,
you reside in LA with your partner Yasmin and a 9-year-old daughter Haven and a 1-year-old puppy Aya. Coach AK, welcome to the Frustrated CEO podcast.
Well, thank you. I just want to say thank you, Leb. Thank you, Patsy. Thank you, Patrick. And Patsy, sorry for taking 2 hours out of your day.
I took copious notes, all very action-oriented, which we will discover about you.
Yeah. So I know how that feels almost. I kind of did that intentionally when someone watches those YouTube videos. You start off like, I just want to fix my faucet. And then somehow you end up 2 hours later realizing, oh yeah, the purpose of life.
That's right.
No, excited to be here. 100, so honored just to be part of this conversation and really just enjoy the next however long we decide to talk together and hopefully provide value to your listeners.
Amen. Well, so I shared a little bit about you just from what I know, but let's give you an opportunity. Tell us about yourself.
Yes, I honestly think it's the hardest question to answer because there's so many layers to each and every single one of us. You know what I've learned throughout my life is that we have so many different layers that make us who we are. Yes, I'm an athlete. Yes, I'm a father. Yes, I'm an entrepreneur. But all of those layers is what make me who I am. Each of those. So yes, I grew up in Colorado. I'm a triplet. I have a twin brother and a twin sister. Meaning that there's someone that looks exactly like me, and then there's someone that kind of looks like me, except with just longer hair, right? And I promise you, she's gorgeous. She's beautiful. And the reason I talk about that a lot is because, I can share my DNA with someone, but we have different hobbies, different beliefs. We have things that are similar. We sound the same. We laugh the same, but things are different. And so the work that I do is I really want to make sure that I meet people where they're at. Because I think we can all imagine over the last 2 years of the pandemic, how much of our lives have changed. And so, yes, I was an athlete, but don't ask me to run a 400-meter race because I will probably be laying down on the ground after the first 30 meters, just to let you know. But yes, you're going to learn more about me. Super excited. But the reason is it's such a hard question is because, I believe that we're always growing. We're always in adapting. And there's so many layers that make us who we are. How do we distill a lifetime into a one-sentence byline? Hopefully it's impossible.
That's good.
I like it. So let's set the stage for today. Some of the topics that we've brought you on to help us address for our listener. The art of storytelling, from what I've seen from knowing you, you have a gift for it. You have a passion for teaching it. So we're going to talk about storytelling and how you as a listener can incorporate that into your business or relationships to better connect with people. We'll talk about some strategy. We'll talk about implementation. But Coach, where I want to start is the positive mindset.
Mm.
Again, our listeners, the CEOs facing, you just mentioned the pandemic, right? So the pandemic, even after the pandemic, there's still just waves of stuff that comes at us day after day. And when you're leading an organization of people, you're not just trying to overcome things for yourself, you're trying to lead others through whatever the issue of the day might be, the ups and the downs. And one of the things that our listener may not know about you, you narrowly missed the 2008 Olympics. You narrowly missed making the 2008 Olympic team. Obviously a setback. Obviously you had been training hard for that. Talk about what that experience might have been like, and then how, what did you learn from it? How do you, we'll talk about the importance of positive mindset to take that setback and learn from it and keep moving forward.
No, thank you. And hopefully it doesn't break up like no, it's that moment was really impactful for me. I was an All-American athlete from the University of Oregon. I ran track and field. I still hold records till today. And I remember this very well. It was 2007. I had a very successful track and field career at the University of Oregon and decided to play football. And so what happened when I was playing football, my body was just getting beat up all the way to the point that I actually tore my ACL. And after tearing my ACL, I was done with sports. I was done with it. Something that I thought for so many years was part of my identity. All of a sudden, I lost that. And so, and I'm going to connect this, how this all connects to the Olympics, because I have a particular speaking style. It's called rambling. And so I promise that everything that I say will come back and it'll all make sense in a pretty little bow at some point. But the thing about it is, I ran track and field. I did football. I tore my ACL. I didn't want anything to do with sports. And what ended up happening was that it was so bad of being done with sports that I didn't even want to get my ACL repaired. Because I said, I'm not going to play sports. I had no interest in it. And I wanted to make sure that my ACL stayed torn so I never get back into it. So during this time, I ended up gaining 40 pounds. I'm not in the best shape of my life. And I go on to this trip with my girlfriend at the time to Raro, over in the Cook Islands. And I remember sitting there and one of the family friends comes to me and says, "Hey, AK, how about, I heard your story. Have you ever thought about training for the Olympics?" He actually happened to be an Olympic swimmer. And I looked down and I was thinking, this isn't exactly the physique of an elite level athlete by any means. But that conversation really stuck with me. And I ended up staying, and I ended up actually, going back and going through rehab and actually training for the Olympics, all the way up until the point that I'm getting flown over to Nigeria. And this is the home country of my parents. I was going to be running the 400 for for the Nigeria.
Wow.
And I was going there for this meet. And a week later was going to be the Olympic trials. Now, I get down on the ground. It's my first time doing an international travel, 19 hours on the road. And as I'm sitting in my room getting ready for this meet tomorrow, I get a knock on the door. And this meet organizer comes up and says, "Hey, you know that Olympic trials we're doing in a week? We're actually going to do it tomorrow." And I'm like, whoa. I've been in 19 hours of travel. I'm tired. And they said, well, what you have to do if you want to make the Olympics, you got to get top 3. And I'm like, okay.
Well,
So I remember I get down on the track. It's the following day. And I remember getting onto the line and warming up. It's like, this is my moment. This is a year of training, of going over and, getting back in shape after tearing my ACL. Like, this is my moment. And so I remember the gun going off. I remember getting off, and I crossed the finish line, and I look up at the scoreboard, and I get 3rd place. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I made the Olympics. I was like, the happiest moment ever. I was getting toured around Africa saying, this is the Olympic team. And then I end up going from there to this meet in Egypt, where we have to do this qualifier. And so after this meet, all I wanted at that moment was a cold glass of water. Everything I've been having is warm. So I just go downstairs to the bar area. I was like, can I just get a cold glass of water? So they give me some water with some ice, and I drink it. And then a few hours later, I wake up in the middle of the night, and my stomach is like, it is not feeling well.
Oh no.
So I am sick and sick as a dog. I am not feeling well. So I have to get back on the ground. I was like, I'm perfectly fine. I got a lot of time to get ready for the Olympics. So I get down on the ground after, a long travel. And as I'm sitting in my room, I get a knock on the door. And the knock on the door is the same meet organizer that says, that whole Olympic trials thing we did a week ago? We're actually going to do it tomorrow again. We're going to redo it. And I'm like, whoa, okay. But instead of having one main heat of qualifiers, they make it an open competition. So there was 40 heats. I had to go through 6 rounds.
Oh my gosh.
So I make it through the first round. I make it through the second round. I don't make it through the third round. And I just kind of dropped. And I'm like, wow. I had that feeling of knowing what it makes to make the Olympics as well as losing the Olympics. So when people talk about that, what did that mean to me? I consider it a blessing in disguise. And especially as I'm talking about this with CEOs, is sometimes you're going to have these setbacks. Right. But if I had to look about where I was beforehand, a year beforehand, a torn ACL, 40 pounds overweight, not passionate about sports. And I look at that trajectory a year later, I'm traveling around the world on one of the biggest stages. And yes, I watched the Olympics at my home. But what I learned from that was that my 2 colleagues, my teammates, they made the Olympics. And what happened? They woke up the next day and expecting what? The world to be different. But they woke up and the day after effect came. I was like, okay, you know what I need? I need 2 Olympics. So what did they do? They trained for 4 years, got that Nether Olympics, woke up the next day, and like, hey, life is still the same. See, what I learned from this Olympic story for myself was I always felt that I needed to be an Olympian before I could make an impact on the world. I felt that I needed to become an Olympian before I could work with a Nike or a Google or XYZ. And realizing was only holding me back, and realizing that not making it actually made me realize that, hey, I can take control. I decided that my entrepreneurship journey is not about the destination. It is about me making this choice to put my life in my own hands. So all these CEOs, all these entrepreneurs, the moment you said you wanted to be an entrepreneur was the moment that you said, hey, I want to take control of my life. I believe that there's a future that I want to take. I'm going to put myself in the control seat.
Terrific. Yeah.
Wow.
I did say we were going to cover storytelling. You're not so bad at it. I'll just tell you that.
How would you say what happened? I don't know.
Only to the point of leaving us inspired and speechless at the same time.
So you mentioned working with Google, with Nike. Right now, you are working with Google on as the Google sales coaching lead. How do you incorporate storytelling, or do you incorporate storytelling into the work that you're doing there? How do you teach others to? Leb mentioned, for some it's just a natural gift. For others, can you learn it? If I'm listening right now, like, wow, man, he's really good. I could never be like that. Is it something that you can learn?
As a matter of fact, how about we just teach it right now to all your listeners?
Okay.
Oh,
All
Would
right.
that work? I mean, I can
Let's do it.
speak high level. I mean, the reason what I actually see with storytelling, I mean, if you watch a movie, if you watch any story, it's what keeps us engaged. And yes, I work at Google, which is very, very tech heavy. But at the end of the day, how can you communicate the work you do in a way for the listener to, one, understand, but also feel something? So I'm going to ask you all a question. I went to the store to get a shirt. That's the story, right? So I want Patrick, Patsy, Leb, what comes into your mind when I say I went to the store to get a shirt? What shirt came into your mind, Patrick?
The first visual I got was like a Hawaiian shirt. Why, I don't know, but that's what I saw.
Okay, Patsy.
I had a pink button-down shirt.
Leb.
I had a shirt similar to what you're wearing, like a open collar, show a little bit of that chest, and actually the dark color looks good on you.
Thank you. I guess the question is, why didn't we all have the same vision in our mind about the shirt?
I think we all look through the lens, the filter of our own experiences, right? Is it personal preferences? Or, to Leb immediately was looking at you, right? Since you said I'm going to, so he just went right to the shirt you're wearing versus, so I guess I don't know, that we all bring our own perspective when we answer that question.
100%. Like, especially one of the things I'm going to say is I love this type of style. Like, I can talk for 45 minutes, but I believe that the real learning happens when we're all here together and sharing the experience together. And so with storytelling, the reason why we didn't have it is because we didn't have clarity. But if I said I went to Abercrombie and Fitch, or if I went to, we'll just say if I went to Dolce & Gabbana to get a shirt, what comes into your mind?
Right. Well, that's actually, AJ, that's the question, AK, that's the question I thought you were going to ask, is where did I go? Because you just brought up a whole other visual for me. If you go into that type of store, it's a fashionable, high-end clothing store, and it's about fashion.
It's about fashion.
Yeah. So that means the story changes, right?
Story changes. So if I said I went to 7-Eleven to get a shirt, what happens to that visual?
It kind of gets a little foggy.
Like, what kind of shirt are you getting? What kind of
Exactly.
t-shirt you get?
Yeah, scratching my head.
But it's funny. It even changes the context. Like, it went from being an elegant story, like it's something with, oh, this is going to be humorous. Like, I just because the store itself changed, to me it said the direction of the story is going to change as well. Instead of a higher end story, it's going to be more of a silly story or a funny story.
Right. So if I just said, put data and facts, is that when you tell a story, it puts the listener into it. Now imagine if you just went to 7-Eleven and bought a shirt, what would that do to that story as you're listening to it?
So if I had just come from 7-Eleven and bought my own shirt, and you said I went to 7-Eleven and bought a shirt, I would I'd certainly be looking at it through the lens of my own experience. Yeah, I did that too, right? I'm now there with you. I'm walking. Yeah, I'm walking in there with you. I can see the coat rack, the shirt rack, because I was just there and I did it myself, right? So I'm immersed in the story that way.
100%. And so the purpose of stories is about connection. When you are watching that movie and you can relate with that character, right? The reason why you see people crying in movies is because there was a moment that you connected with the story, you connected with the character. And we already know that the reason why people buy is not because of logic, not because of data, but because of emotion. But we use emotion to justify the logic. So yes, we can use data, but we have to make it connect to the user, and that is why we use stories. And oftentimes when we think about stories, our goal is, how can we make, especially in business, for that CEO, not to make your company the hero, but make your client the hero of the story. And what makes a story impactful, so if I just said, hey, I won $1 million, and then I won like $2 million, and everything was amazing, like, you don't connect with it,
right?
Because it's high level. But if you start and you create these story arcs, hey, once upon a time, you're on notice. guy and girl met. And all of a sudden, it was love at first sight. And now they were so super connected. And you look at that story arc and it's going up. And then all of a sudden, he gets this letter in the mail and he has to go to war. What happens? You create that story arc.
Yeah.
And so he's in there, in the war, at this lowest possible moment, behind the barracks, trying to fight it. And all of a sudden, he looks in his pocket and finds this letter that his long-lost love went because she thought she was gone, and goes back home, right? The part of stories, like I want to make sure when I'm telling a story that you feel happiness, sadness, excitement. Not level. You need to create these arcs. So when you're telling a story for a CEO, you want to think about it as this. Starting it off with who is the hero? Who's the character? And the character should not be you. It should be the hero of the story. They should that client should see themselves as the hero. And then when they see themselves as the hero, what is the challenge that they faced? What was the obstacle? Because if a hero doesn't actually have any obstacles, they're not really a hero. They're not overcoming anything. So you as that frustrated CEO, you as that business owner, you as that whatever, you have to identify what is the problem? What's the challenge? What's the entity that you're fighting against? Is it the pandemic? Is it loss of sales? Is it XYZ? And then what you do is when you identify it, is you then identify the high point. What's the success moment? So you go to the hero, you then go to the problem, and you want to get to the lowest problem, like the lowest moment. Identify the highest moment, and then what you really do in the middle is that approach. What was the approach that you took them to get from that lowest moment to that highest moment? And being specific. So if a CEO is looking about how to tell a story that can follow that particular framework, and that's already going to create that arc. And obviously, make them the hero. And I say this because when we're thinking about having conversations with clients, if we make the customer the hero, your business will also win. But if your business wins, does that guarantee that their business is going to win? No.
Yeah, that's good. That's
so
good.
Always make sure that your customer, your client is the winner because you will win as well.
And it's interesting as you say that, I'm just thinking in my own mind about my own business, right? And whenever the customer wins, they project that feeling, they project that winning back to me, right? And I think it does that. So if that is my mantra, that my customer always needs to win, that should guide my decision making. That should guide. To your point, it should guide the sales process. It should guide the strategies that I implement. I should be focused on making my customer the winner, and then by proxy, the collateral damage is they'll appreciate me for it. Right?
Yeah. Well, you even think this actionable. The next client meeting that you have, the first question you should ask yourself is, what would make this meeting an 11 out of 10 for your client? What does a successful meeting look like for your client, for their lens?
Yeah.
And could you also say, you're primarily here referring to external customers, but you also have internal customers. So what can make my team or my, frontline workers or my, salespeople or
100%. Yeah.
Crafting that story depending on who you're talking about and the message you want to get across with that idea in mind.
With them in mind. Every conversation should be, how can I make the person across from me the winner? How can I make them better than they were the day yesterday? Yes, I coach, but that is my goal. How do I make them the winner? Because if they win, I win. That has been literally my approach in how I navigate business. It's focusing on the success of the other.
But now here's what's interesting. I'm guessing that you saying that here That's not the first time that thought or that concept has passed your lips. You're right that you have shared that same philosophy and approach with salespeople. Maybe it's my own stereotype of salespeople. I've worked with them, I've coached them, I've known them. In my own business, I am one. Salespeople like to win, right? Salespeople compare themselves to other salespeople. And a lot of our incentive programs in companies are built to drive competitiveness, competition among salespeople. How does that message land when you're talking to a sales team? So if you're the CEO, you're the listener, and you're thinking, okay, I have to go get my sales team to understand that it's not about them winning, it's about the customer winning, or it's about the other people on the sales team winning and not you. How does that message land? And then how do you overcome that? Have you experienced resistance to that message, and how do you overcome that?
Well, the funny thing is I don't get as much resistance. It's more like, oh, I never thought about that. Because most of the time they're thinking, I need to pitch my product. I need to pitch my idea.
Right.
And I'm not even saying no to that. As a matter of fact, if you go into a discovery meeting and you ask the client, before you even present your product, what do you want? What does success look like for you? Same product, but the way in which you communicate that product will be different. So I say to you, why waste your time 4 hours creating a pitch deck?
Yeah.
Rather than saying, I look at it as a pitch, as an alignment meeting. Hey, we've had conversations beforehand. I'm just aligning to what we've said previously. Does this still hold true? But what most people do is they pitch, step back, expect fireworks, like, oh my goodness, I killed it. But they have no idea what the other person wants. It's almost as me saying, hey, we're going to go to get barbecue for lunch, everybody. Cool. And then somebody's like, I'm not going. Why? It's like 5-star rated. It's like the best barbecue in the house.
Oh, I'm a vegetarian.
100%.
Yeah.
It makes your life easier. That's what I'm telling the salespeople. Like, you can go into a meeting without a deck and ask a question and sit back and feel like the champion, because who do people like talking about the most?
Themselves.
Themselves. So allow that to happen.
It's funny you use the words "I killed it," because actually, when all you're doing is pitching, you're killing it.
I killed it. Yeah, you killed that presentation.
I killed the whole conversation. The relationship didn't go anywhere. We didn't get aligned. We didn't go together. We didn't understand each other, but I killed it.
Exactly. And they're high-fiving like, woo! And then they'll be like, can you just send me more information, please?
Yeah. Yes. Yep.
So.
But this circles back to what you said a few minutes ago. It's about stories keep the listener engaged and evoke emotions. So somebody asking me about my needs certainly makes me want to lean in, as opposed to yawn because I'm getting a 4-hour pitch. So,
exactly.
Yeah, it's a good example.
So I have an example and a different kind of question. I was in high tech for 4 years, and I was in a sales event. And they brought in a motivational speaker, and it was someone who had climbed Everest and lost his nose and his toes, and and I think that the global leader of sales thought that the motivational point for his global sales team would be don't stop. Nothing, you can make it through anything. And the story sounded like that for a while, and everybody was really engaged until the moment when he said, I didn't know if I was going to make it off this mountain. And what he said was, all I could think about was my family. And he started talking about his wife, and he started talking about his children, and he started talking about the deeper level of motivation that actually caused him to be able to be there having this conversation with people. And the global sales leader was upset because he thought he got thrown a curveball. But actually what happened is this deeper level of alignment, so to speak, about, you know,
Huge.
the maybe purposefulness, like, yeah, I'm out here selling, but I'm out here supporting my family. I'm out here. And it just brought this whole other conversation into the mix. So I'm just curious about, what you're sharing and how that may relate in some way to going deeper with people.
This is, in terms of business, I would say that this is the most important and overlooked element of business, of relationships.
Yeah.
I have this, keynote, this facilitation that I do called Unbranded. And what I have people do, and you can actually do this, and I'd actually maybe even have you pause, but I would want you to put a list together of what makes you, you. I'm talking about everything. Put a list of like 40 things in a bullet point form of all the items that make you who you are. This might be your hobbies, your beliefs, your mottos. This might be where you're from, important dates, positives, negatives, people. Put a list together. And then what I want you to do afterwards is I want you to go one by one in reverse until you get to your number one. Right? The funny thing is I've done this hundreds of times across the globe. Maybe more than that. And the thing is, nobody has ever had the exact same list, ever.
Sure.
And everybody's number one might be the same for some people. It might be a person or a motto or a place. But the story behind that and the reason why somebody might have put my daughter or my wife or, faith, there's a story behind it. That's one. The secondary element that I added was another list that I have them write in afterwards, and it's on meaning. So, and there's 9 different categories. The first one is security and certainty. This might be like, I want to make sure that I'm secure physically and financially, or I need to make sure that I know that things are going to be a certain way. That's one. Another one might be adventure and variety. Like, I want to make sure that there's newness in my life. I want to have variety. I just can't sit and do the same thing each and every single day. The next one is significance. I want to make sure that I'm significant. People recognize me. They know that it's what important. The next one is growth and challenges. I want to make sure that I'm growing. I want to make sure that I'm overcoming obstacles. I want to make sure that I'm living a life where I'm growing. Another one, this might connect to yours, Leb, is connection, love, and belonging. Connection, love, and I want to make sure that I'm connected. I want to make sure I'm around love and family. Another one is freedom and independence. I want to make sure that I have the independence and the freedom to do what I need to do. I can't do the same thing every day. I want to make sure that I have the autonomy to live the life I want to live. Harmony. Harmony is, I want to make sure that my home life, my personal life, and my hobbies are all working synergetically. Mastery. I want to make sure that I'm getting better, becoming the best in the world at what I do. And the last one is contribution and higher purpose. I want to make sure that what I am doing is towards a bigger cause. Now, why do I mention that? Is because managers think, I'm just going to throw more money at you and that's going to motivate you.
Right.
But if it doesn't address, if mine is, you can give me all the money in the world, but if I have to sit in a desk in a cubicle every single day, I don't care how much you're going to pay me. I am saying no, because my number one for me is adventure and variety. See, the thing is, everybody has something different. Your team has something different. Your clients have something different. Your enemies have something different. But if you don't understand it, if you don't know it, if you don't know their number one, if you don't know their list and their number one, if you don't know that their number one is their wife or their family, and you're saying, hey, can you work a little bit extra, but it happens to be date night with your partner? Sorry, it ain't going to happen. It's the most important thing to them. And as a matter of fact, you having them spend that extra weekend or that extra day to do work away from their family is actually going to cause more damage than good.
Yeah.
That's good.
Yeah.
So our goal at the end of the day is, how can we align and identify? One, through introspectively, because if you don't know what's important to you, if you don't know your own list, you will not be able to communicate it to other people. So you have to be introspective in yourself first. And then 2, you have to be willing to have these conversations with your colleagues and then understand, oh, this is what's important to you. I know what motivates you. I know. And that's what's really going to align And that's oftentimes why we have a lot of dysfunction, is because of different priorities. We don't understand the motivations and the drives of an individual on our team. One, because we never ask.
Yeah. AK, it triggers another question that I want to bring into the conversation. You know, I forget where it came from. Maybe it was Good to Great, this book, Good to Great, but there's this exercise of the 5 whys, and you keep peeling it back.
Mhm.
And, you know, I've participated in that particular exercise where people get pretty emotional. I've actually seen, you know, men cry and women cry. I mean, but the thing that the leaders shy away from in that is the fact that it will get emotional.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So do you have any, you know, thoughts, things to say about that? It's okay to be emotional. That's part of it's what makes a great athlete, what makes a great salesperson, what makes a great story. But for some reason, I find that bringing out human emotion for some leaders and CEOs and managers is something they want to shy away from.
Just because we shy from emotions doesn't mean that we don't feel.
Sure.
And so I would say, especially during this time, what I've learned, what I've seen, especially with the pandemic, showing more of yourself is actually the number one thing that I believe is actually what CEOs need to do.
Yeah.
To connect with their employees. And I'm not saying you need to cry.
Mhm.
I'm just saying that being non-emotional and a robot makes you less approachable.
Yep.
Right.
Meaning, if I have to be perfect, if I can't be vulnerable, you're basically creating an environment where it's like, okay, I just can't be vulnerable or honest with you. So all you're going to get is surface level employees.
Yeah.
That are then going to become surface level, non-empathetic sellers, teams, whatever it needs to be. So it starts with you as the leader. You are modeling the behavior that you want your customers or your clients or your colleagues to show inside the organization and outside of the organization. So I've been doing some work with some auto teams. And if anybody knows, in the auto industry, it's kind of been hit. People haven't been able to buy cars. If you've been in the pandemic, the market.
Mm-hmm.
If you go into that meeting and you just say, buy this, but you're not being empathetic to what's going on in their world,
Right.
it's going to cause a disconnect. So we have to be able to not only feel it, but also see it in others.
Yeah, that's great. That's great.
Step into it.
So what other behaviors or skills would go on that list? Because you're already, you know, you're starting to talk about some traditionally not business as usual skills and behaviors here.
Mm-hmm. So some other skills that I would say, and it's all, when we're thinking about the CEO or the entrepreneur or the solo entrepreneur, I've been lucky to work with 40,000 people plus around the globe. And the number one thing that I've learned and seen is that people need 3 things. Clarity. They just need clarity. So when they talk about a strategic plan, it's like, we're all on the same page. Like, how do we just find some clarity in this world of confusion? 2, an aligned roadmap. Why do I say that? It's because the more people you bring into an environment, it then creates different expectations, outcomes, vision. So let's say me and and this is a true story. I had a CEO, a co-founder for a fashion company I had. If my vision was to create a company where I could be able to do it from my phone, and his vision of the company was he wanted his name on the side of a building, and we were creating a plan. And sometimes we may be at odds because I'm trying to find ways to automate. He's trying to find ways of creating structure. So the purpose of the strategic plan, I would say, is alignment between all team members. Are we on the same page? Do we want the same things? So the first one is clarity. creating a shared roadmap, and then execution. An execution, because we already know that something called, whenever we put a plan, something called life steps in the way.
Mm-hmm.
So I asked you this question, Patrick, we've been having conversations. What would happen if I just no-called, no-showed today? I just didn't respond. I just didn't show up. What would happen? What do you think?
Well, I think it's funny. It's funny you say that. That happened once. My natural tendency is to assume good intent, not think that you just blew us off, but that something happened that maybe you forgot. So while we were waiting for you, I would reach out. I'd probably text or call, email. Hey, we're here. Can you jump on? Are you still able to work? Does today work? If not, different time. I would assume that until I heard otherwise. At which
Let's
point,
say like what happened. I was like, oh no, I was actually just scrolling through Facebook.
Well, even that, I think if you were just scrolling through Facebook, I think I'd be like, okay, that happens. My own, we talked earlier about like you look at things through your own perspective. I've done that, right? I've had meetings or appointments where I was like, oh crap, I got pulled into YouTube or I got pulled into this, or so I would give you the benefit of the doubt. Then I would reschedule and we would move on. I think I would meet my own lens. I would respect that more than you just kind of ghosted us, where you just disappear and we never hear from you again. Then I'm kind of making an assessment of your level of accountability, or and then that would leave us in a lurch. We'd have to figure out, crap, we have a show that needs to drop this Tuesday. What are we going to do? And we'd go into scramble mode.
And let's say
the question.
Let's say I did that, and let's say you gave me another chance and I did it again.
Okay, then I think after the second time, you're right. I'd be like, okay, yeah, 2 strikes and you're out.
And if somebody said, hey, do you know this AK guy? What would you say? Would you recommend it?
I would not be able to recommend for something that required you to physically show. Yeah,
I think you said it in like the nicest possible way. And I think that says more about you than it does about most people. They would have been like, oh yeah, he's dead to me. The reason I say that is because a no-call, no-show, in 2 chances, it would have ruined my reputation with you. Right?
Yep.
Right.
And so I say that is because how often do we no-call and no-show ourselves? How often do we no-call, no-show ourselves? I have this plan. I'm going to work out. I just didn't do it. Like, how often do we no-call? Oftentimes.
Often.
Often.
Yeah.
So
leave ourselves hanging.
I thought you were going to ask how many times today have I done that?
I was going to hold that off. As you see, there's some questions that I asked in some statements. That was going to be a question because I didn't want to ask the question. But the reason I asked it is we saw what happens when we no-call, no-show somebody twice or once. But when we no-call, no-show ourselves, we do it daily. And we're like, why don't I get the results that I wanted? It's if we could show the same accountability to ourselves, to our plans, to our missions that we show to third-party people, these plans that we create would be executed. But I know me. I am a speaker. I am a presenter. I can talk in circles around myself. Like, you know what? I didn't work out today because you know what? I'm going to do it later when it's, you have your reasoning.
Yeah.
So I think for all of these individuals, the 3 that I was focusing on is clarity, a shared roadmap, and execution. And then the 4th I can always say is reflection. Like looking back, what worked, what didn't work, being able to pivot, going around that circle.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's easy to look at it linearly in a linear fashion. What that last piece is, it is circular.
Yeah.
And frequent.
Yeah.
It's good.
So we have CEOs who listen. We have leaders who listen. The thing that's coming up for me, AK, is that I get the point about no calling, no show myself, and I own it. And yeah, I do that. I've had dreams, fly away without any action. But I also recognize that sometimes it happens in particular categories of your life.
Mm-hmm.
And I can't, I can't even count the number of times I've talked to leaders and said, if it isn't working at home, it's not working.
Yeah.
And, okay, once, maybe I called no showed my family because I got that special request from somebody.
Yeah.
But when it becomes a pattern, then there's a big cost.
Huge cost. I've had a lot of conversation with CEOs, with entrepreneurs that were in this grind mode until, in some ways, a pandemic, for some of them, slowed things down where they were able to be more reflective.
Right.
And so one of the things that they realized was, as we all talk about the Zoom fatigue, there's also the Zoom insights. It was like, oh my goodness, I didn't know you had a child. I didn't know that until they came on the camera and they were doing it. I didn't know you had a pet. I didn't know the background. So beforehand about CEOs, what we felt like we could, and this kind of goes back to the emotion. We feel like we can only show one parts of ourselves.
Right.
No, you're not showing one parts of it. You're not showing them parts. You're ignoring the other part. That's what's really happening. People think like, I'm just going to show one parts of me. Like, no, you're just ignoring the rest of those pieces. And what I learned and what I've learned and had these conversations is when you're in these meetings and identifying the other parts of these other people's lives, and then you also realize to recognize those parts in your lives, I've seen more than people are super flexible. We're thinking that we need to be something, but nobody actually asked us to be. Nobody asked us to be work on weekends away from our family.
Yeah.
We felt that in our mindset that we needed to. What I realized is my partner and I was like, I was a workaholic. I understand this. I work a lot. Is I've actually gone on the extreme. Every 2 weeks, I go on a camping trip with my family away from technology. And the reason why that happens is because, one, it's creating memories and moments.
Yeah.
Memories and moments that my 9-year-old girl, Haven, will remember. And two, taking my away from 2 days actually makes me much more refreshed and ready when the work happens. Because beforehand, it literally felt like Friday happened, and then Sunday was like, and then like Friday happened, and I was like Monday, like, oh my goodness, I didn't have a break. If an athlete would work that hard consistently, they're going to get injured.
Yeah. Right. I love that. I kind of put that in the reflection part of your execution and reflection.
Mm-hmm.
And if and that the action is you can actually build it in however you want to build it in.
And communicate that to your team.
Right. If there's no pause, if there's no reflection, if there's no step away, sooner or later something's going to happen that you didn't want to have happen.
Exactly. And something that I learned also that we talked about is not balance, but counterbalancing. So we talk a lot about balance, but it's actually about counterbalance. Like, it's really, nobody's ever 100% balanced. But knowing that counterbalance means at some point, yes, there is going to be a moment where work is high. There's also going to be moments when work is slow and family. So we have to learn that balance isn't like every single day, but it might be a period of time.
Yeah.
But knowing that just because it's here at one moment, you still have to communicate to those other parties that, hey, you are important. And so that's why I also go to the 80-20 and understanding what's more important. I know that if I watch a movie and go on a walk with my partner in the evening, that is more impactful than me telling her I love her 20 times in the day. I should do both, yes. But taking that 1 hour in the day will actually get me much further of the time. It's not about time, it is the quality time that you're spending in each of them.
Good. AK, you mentioned unbranded earlier, which I want to give you a chance to elaborate on that a little bit. My understanding is it's right, shedding the labels. It's not compartmental, not putting myself in a box, and not putting anybody else in a box. And where I think that's relevant to a CEO, not just with people, but with issues. We always, the three of us, Leb, Patsy, and I, as we work with CEOs, we're always trying to challenge those beliefs, trying to challenge where a CEO or a senior leader knows exactly what's happening here and therefore knows exactly how it needs to be addressed. They put things in boxes. So how do you talk about unbranded? Talk about looking at things differently, looking at people differently to, is it unbrand them? Is it to see things differently?
Well, I believe that the number one problem in the world today is the boxes we put around ourselves and others. I'll use a social issue. If you're a Republican or a Democrat, what they said is, just let me know. You've probably been in this conversations, or any of us have. You say a little bit like, okay, you've said this. I know now everything about you because you said this whole thing.
Absolutely.
So what ends up happening is that we stop listening. I know you, so I don't need to hear anymore because I've already put all of your whole essence of your whole being. But what ends up happening is it always creates an us and them. It creates these big things. You can be on the same side, but you see it from completely different lenses. And so I have this example of, I was in Boston in 2016. If anybody was in, the United States in 2016 in the political time, it was a very welcoming time. Everybody was very kumbaya.
Right. I remember that well.
And I remember I was in Boston and I was going onto the train. I needed to get to this location. And I remember sitting down. And as I was sitting down, someone came into the train and had a particular shirt on that represented his political affiliation. And at that moment, I had a particular feeling like, I just didn't feel good at the moment. And I was like, I have nothing to talk about with this individual. And so we sat down, and at that moment, I was like, okay, I need to think about this differently. And I remember I started looking around. I looked at his shoes. I looked at his bag. And then I noticed on his back pocket, he had a pair of drumsticks. Now, for me, I played drums all throughout growing up. And so at a moment when I had nothing to talk about, I had everything to talk about. So I actually walked over there and we started talking about drumming. And we were talking so long that we actually went to the end of the stop station, like the end of the line. We got back on and then came back in the other direction.
That's cool.
And the reason why I tell you that story is because what ended up happening is that I just saw him differently. I saw our shared identities. I saw that we actually weren't that far apart, because what happens is if we don't see someone, one, we're not going to trust them. We're not going to understand them. And so in our business, in our worlds, in our colleagues, whatever, if we don't feel like we're on the same page, if we don't see each other, it's always going to be an us and them situation. So even if you're in a conversation with a CEO and having a difficult conversation or a conversation at all, we have to create a us dynamic and not a them, and like two separate sides of the aisle. And so the first thing I tell the people is that first exercise I did. Write that list of all the layers that make you who you are. Understand you're not just a CEO. That is not your only title. You're a father, you're a mother, and all that kind of stuff. A hobbyist. I'm dyslexic. I have ADD, as you probably can already tell. But we have to be able to see the multiple layers in ourselves, to see the multiple layers in other people, and that's what builds connections and trust. And at the end of the day, in the work in which we do, whether with our teams, our colleagues, our clients, is trust. Because if I don't trust you, I don't care what we're doing. That is a fundamental thing about why the work that I do is what I do. How do you build trust?
Yep.
Thank you.
So I'm curious, what in your life that has had you start to look for the drumsticks, as opposed to just the clothes that somebody has on? What has brought you to that place of inquiry and discovery?
Inquiry and discovery. I mean, I have these types of conversations on a daily basis. I wish that I was Perfect. I mean, I would say one is, as a father, is huge. You know, as a father, my daughter has taught me so much about life. And oftentimes we feel that the older we get, the wiser that we are. And yeah, in some ways. But my daughter has taught me about how to be a kid again, how not to judge, how not to take things so seriously, how to be playful. So for me, how I see that now, and answering the question is, sometimes when I'm having a conversation with my daughter, I have to then see, no, 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 no. What am I seeing? Okay. I have to see her differently. I'm not seeing her as a daughter. What I'm seeing her now is she loves to dance. She loves to play. She loves these pieces. I need to see her from that angle. Because if not, and I put myself in this hierarchy, I'm never going to be able to be introspective in myself. That's one. Two, I think in the social issues that happen. Me too. Within, you know, I always talk about this example when we're talking about social issues is how often do I need to, when I'm going to my car at night, do I need to put keys in my hand when I'm walking to my car? Or how often do I need to make sure that I'm not walking down a dark alley because something? Never. I don't worry about that. How often do I have to worry about, you know, wheelchair accessible areas? I don't. But just because I do not experience it doesn't mean that other people don't.
Mm.
So my goal here is, to what Patsy said, my goal is I want to do that much more often.
Yep.
I have to be able to understand that the world, as much as I think about it, doesn't revolve around me. And the more that I'm able to understand that, the more and easier it is for me to actually level with people, build connection and trust. But you can never trust somebody and understand them if you actually don't see things from their point of view.
I'm just thinking how powerful that message is to a CEO. Because as the CEO, you feel like, even if you don't necessarily want to be the center of the world, you feel like you've got all these balls in the air.
Mm-hmm.
You have to always be on. You're the, you know, your job, you could argue that job is incredibly important, perhaps the most important. And yet you can't forget that there are all these other people in the organization. There are customers, there are other people in the marketplace, and their stories are just as important, right? You can't become so myopic that your whole universe revolves around what's on your plate and what you're responsible for, and forget all of those people that are looking to you to lead them.
Mm-hmm. It's so important, and it's hard because it goes both ways, right? I think also as the employees also understanding that the CEO just isn't a CEO as well. Right? Like they have issues when they leave that they have to navigate with. And so when I do my training sessions, my goal is CEO, you're joining the session because you're going to benefit, because it also is going to reduce the resistance for them to be able to connect with you more and not just see you as the CEO, but see like, oh, you also have a kid that walks onto the screen. You also have all of these different elements, and then it becomes much more relatable. And we already know that the reason why people stay isn't just salary, especially millennials. They want to be in a culture, in a positive culture, a connected culture, an impactful culture.
Right.
It's not just about the X and O's at the end of their paycheck. It's also about, do I feel seen? Do I want, is this a place that I want to be at 8 to 9 hours out of the day?
Mm-hmm. AK, I know you do work around purpose and, you know, identity and purpose. And, you know, we're just talking about millennials and people staying and culture. And, you know, we do a lot of work around being intentional with your culture. Are you noticing that organizations that are purposeful about giving back or locally impacting, you know, the local, giving to their local communities, being charitable, whatever the case may be, supporting kids, is that part of the story? Do you know, are you being asked to help organizations understand, not just individuals, but the organization itself understand how to be purposeful?
Well, I would say I'm into the work of seeing what they're doing externally, not as much, because usually it's some inter-team dynamics that they're trying to navigate through.
Sure.
But if I want to give a CEO a tip about where and what to be the most purposeful in to create the best culture, isn't compensation, isn't work, is acknowledgement.
Okay.
The number one way to motivate your employees is to acknowledge them, is to see them, meaning, hey, I noticed that you did this work. Nice job. And not only let them then know, hey, everyone, look at what this person did. Phenomenal job. Because most people do not feel like they're being acknowledged or seen in the work that they're doing. So people are keen. What I've seen companies talking about, like, okay, what kind of incentive strategy can I give them? No, just acknowledge the work that they're doing. Give them, be clear about a roadmap promotion.
Yeah.
Right? What they do is they kind of like make it so ambiguous that the person feels out of control. It's like, well, sorry, you didn't get a promotion because of X, Y, and Z, but there's no communication. There's no acknowledgement. There's no feedback. So acknowledging your team will take you a long way, more than you can possibly imagine. That should be your first thing before you even talk about an incentive policy in your company about how to make employees stay. Just acknowledge the work that they're doing, highlight it, award them, let the whole company know about the good work your teammates are doing.
Right. Right.
Love it. And I agree.
Yeah.
I agree. So let's do a quick check. Any other questions or comments or thoughts that anything we haven't covered that we should have covered before we start switching gears into, so what do you do with all this? What we like to call the Let's Get Practical.
I think we could go on for a long time.
I know we could. I have
I'm sorry.
I'm trying to be really good, not ask anymore.
I have questions I didn't get to. I wanted to, but you know, okay. So, well, then let's do that with what we've covered today. A whole lot about storytelling, creating culture, strategy and execution, all really good stuff. AK, thank you. You are as engaging a guest as I knew you would be. So thank you for joining us, spending time. But this is the part where, and you said this, AK, you said this before we started recording. So the listener doesn't know this, but you said this before we started recording, that you are all about action. And we share that. The four of us share that desire that if nothing changes, nothing changes. So it's great. You heard some cool things. You heard some interesting stories. Fantastic. If you get to the end of the podcast and nothing different happens, then what good was it? So the question that we like to ask is, what can our listener implement or do starting today, starting tomorrow, that would begin to make a difference in their ability as a storyteller, or their ability to connect with others, or to see things differently? All the different topics we've covered today. So we'll kick it to you, let you go first.
Okay.
And then we'll all check in and see what we can cover. So what do you got?
Yeah, so the first thing I have, especially in the business world, and I think we can just do this in conversations in general, is in your next upcoming meeting, here's what I want you to do. Before you go to the meeting, I want you to identify what is success, not for you, but for your client, and write it down. And then your goal is simple: help them reach that. So if I can give you one major tip, it is start to put your eyes, your mind, your feet, everything into understanding, making your client the hero, making your spouse the hero, making your child the hero, stepping into their shoes. Because if you make them a superstar, you'll become a superstar as well.
That's awesome.
So I have more, but
yeah, no, keep going. That's good. That's great.
Yeah. Is I always make my activities as simple as possible. I want you to, after that, when you put that meeting plan, day 2, is I want you to make a list of up to 40 things that make you who you are. Bullet point format. I want you to put a list together about what makes you who you are. And then if you want to, that's just an alignment, like literally think about what you put down. And then 2 is in reverse order, one by one, cross that off. Identify might be the things that you identify with the least or just don't connect with until you get to your number 1. I say that intentionally because I do not want you to just say, this is my number 1, because if you just circle your number 1, you'll then cross off the rest of them. But if you go in reverse order, I want to know, you want to know, why did you pick your 16 over your 17? Why did you pick your 12 over your 11? It's actually helping you identify and prioritize what is the most important on your list. And then whenever you get all that top 3 or that number 1, make sure you schedule that and put time in your calendar, because that will dictate your happiness. Because if you find yourself spending time on number 35 on your list while ignoring the number 1, there might be a reason why you feel off-centered. Mm-hmm. Now, a tip to this as I go, and obviously, I think the worst thing to do is bring a speaker to a session because they can talk forever.
No, it's good. Keep going. Keep going.
Is that you can, is what's important is, I ask individuals this question after they do this session. I was like, is there any parents in the room or new parents in the room? And they'd be like, oh yeah, I just had a kid, a year ago. And I asked them, like, so how would your list have looked 2 years ago? Mm-hmm. And they say completely different. So oftentimes we think that our purpose, our meaning is static. Nope, it changes. Mm-hmm. So what we need to do is continually evaluate whenever we feel off, what is important to us. So the first one is, how do you make the other person the hero? Number 2 is being able to understand yourself. And then 3 is, once you go through that process for yourself, do the same activity with somebody else and share what's on your list to build those connections.
Love that. Now, I want to add something to what you just said that I heard you say. I watched one of your videos where you did this exercise with a team, with an audience, and I can hear the listener saying, well, I don't want to cross any of them off because they're all important to me. And what you said to the crowd was, I'm not taking anything away from you. They're all important to you. So it's not like crossing it off means it's no longer important to you. It's just about getting to the ones that are most important. And I thought that was as I was thinking through doing that exercise myself, that's an important thing for a listener to hear, is crossing it off doesn't mean you're wrong, that it's on there. It shouldn't be on there, that it's not important to you. It just means what you're asking me to do is keep going until you get to that most important one.
And the reason why that's so important, one of the questions that I ask as people are going through with it, you actually see them like, oh, they're about to cross something off. And like, no. Or this guy just physically can't do it. And I ask them the question, so why is it so hard? It's just words on a piece of paper. And they say, these mean something. And the reason why that's important is they physically feel uncomfortable to cross words off a piece of paper. And this is where the unbranded thing comes off. Is that if it's so hard to cross off a piece of yourself on that piece of paper, what do you think is happening when we're just putting one person into a box and crossing off all of those other elements to who they are?
Oh, ouch.
So that's what we're doing when we're putting people in the boxes. We're basically saying, that list of 40, remember all that stuff I crossed off? Remove that. Not important. So that's why I say it's not about when you put people into boxes. It is about, you have to be able to see all of them, because if you remove parts of them, it literally feels like a dagger to the chest. It's hard.
Yeah,
that's good.
Beautiful. Thank you. All right. Any others? I don't want to rush you off stage.
I think that's good. My last one is whenever I have a conversation with people, it's, what gets it from the head? Like, we get it. I understand it. I get it conceptually. But how often do we get it from our head into our heart? Meaning I feel it. Maybe something today resonated with you. Maybe it did. Hopefully it did. But how do we get it from our head into our heart and then to our feet? How do we put one foot in front of the other? Because we know it's going to happen. As soon as I click done, after watching this video, something called life is going to step in the way. So how do we make sure that we're not no showing ourselves to the things that's most important?
Good call. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Patsy, what do you got? You want to go?
Well, what AK is talking about goes back to what you're saying earlier around have clarity. So crossing off your list of 40 gives me clarity about what's most important, and then have a roadmap to get there, whether it's for myself, it's for my team, or it's for my organization. So clarity of direction, aligned, you said an aligned roadmap. So we're all on the same page, or I'm on screen. Then how do we execute this? Get it in action, and then reflection. So if we get new information, or we decide maybe something was number 2, not number 1, then how do we course correct?
Yep.
So that's kind of the process of getting into action and staying in action as new information comes. The other piece you talked a lot about is as a leader, whether it's a listener who's a CEO, or I'm a team leader, just a leader in my family, is how do I show more of my authentic self? How do I allow myself to be vulnerable and really show up? And then the other piece was, how do I allow other people to show up? And so have more empathy. So those are the ones that I'm taking away. How about you, Leb?
Well, some of them have been covered beautifully. I really took note of making your client and others the hero. And, kind of shifting the focus away from me showing up, or, killing, as we talked about, killing it. We did that sales pitch. We just killed it, and it's not what we thought it was. I think I just love the notion of recognizing that our purpose isn't static. Sometimes we hang on to the way we were, and we evolve and we change and we learn and we grow. So I thought that was really strong, powerful. Stepping away from tech and creating memories, right? And memories is where the stories come in, and where and it's so important. I mean, I can speak for myself. I've never spent more time on a computer screen over the last 2 years than I did maybe in the first 20 years. And I do step away. I have to. But I think that's an important way to be practical about it. Patsy mentioned that, now more than ever, show who you are. Open it up. Let people know more about yourself as a leader. And it wasn't maybe explicitly mentioned, but when we're doing restructuring work, or especially the kind of things that happen going through the pandemic, and you get to this kind of antiquated thing called the org chart, right? And then here you are, and it says, oh, you're whatever, you're a service manager. And then I'm thinking of the 40, that don't let yourself be boxed in by your title. Even if you're a CEO, you're not just a CEO. You're not just, a VP or a manager or a line person, whatever. It looks like that on an org chart, but that isn't what matters.
Love it.
I'll pass it back to you, Patrick.
All right. Well, I'm glad I took a lot, because you guys, you used a lot of mine, but that's okay. We're all in the same meeting.
There's still some good ones left.
No, there are still some good. Okay. So right off the bat, what I heard when AK, when you're sharing your story about narrowly making the Olympics, and you had this awareness. So here's a message for the CEO: you don't need to be an Olympian to change the world, right? You don't need to be. You don't need to necessarily be in the Olympics to make a difference, right? That you're in charge, and you can make it happen today if you set your mind to it. And then, to your point, move it from your mind to your heart, and then from your heart to your feet. So it's just a good reminder that no matter where you are, no matter what's going on, you don't have to be an Olympian to change the world. I thought it was insightful. You talked about story in all of our conversations about storytelling. You said very simply, the purpose of stories is about connecting with others. So for the CEO, learn, master the art of storytelling. You gave us a framework. So if CEO, if you're listening to this now and you're like, well, how do I do that? Okay, rewind, go back into the conversation. AK gave us a framework for how to create stories. Learn that, implement that so that you can better connect with those around you. In the whole unbranded concept that everyone's characteristics, their passions, and their motivations are different. How can you, as the listener, first identify your own so that you can share that with others, so that others can understand you and connect with you? And then how can you look past the box that you've put people in, look past how you've seen them to understand their passions and their motivations and their characteristics so that you can better understand and connect with them? I thought that was really useful. Don't underestimate the importance of acknowledgement in building a great culture. I think that kind of speaks for itself. So I thought that was good. And then this is one we didn't talk about, but to me, it just comes from having spent an hour with you, AK, as well as two of my colleagues who I really enjoy spending time with and brainstorming. Just surround yourself with positive people. Surround yourself with people who bring out your best, people who are pushing forward themselves, who are not trying to win at your expense, who are growing themselves, because iron sharpens iron. So to be honest, whether anybody listens to this episode or not, I'm better for the conversation that we had. So thank you. I thought that was good. Let's go around. You want a quick round again? Anything we left off? The other things on your list that you're like, okay, here's one more that needs to make this list of let's get practical.
Not for me.
No, I love how you ended off with just iron sharpens iron, the mindset piece. I think that's huge.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Coach AK, thank you for joining us today on the Frustrated CEO podcast. It has been our honor.
And mine as well.
Thank you. Now, if someone is interested in potentially hiring you as a speaker, come speak with their teams, or you do sales coaching and development, what is the best way for a listener to get in touch with you?
They can go to my website. One is coachak.com. So just coachak.com, or just go to LinkedIn. That might be, you can see more about me, and that's also helpful. You can also check me out just by typing AK Ikwuakor. One of the lucky things about having the only name in the world is that if you type it into Google, most likely it is me.
Is that true?
Yeah, I'm the only one.
That's awesome.
In a good and bad way. Like if you see like something bad, it's like, yeah, it's probably also me.
That's right.
Yeah.
Excellent. Patsy, Leb, any final thoughts?
No, thank you. This has been just really fun, really illuminating. I appreciate it.
Yep. Inspiring, engaging, and definitely several steps forward. So thank you.
Thank you. Listener, thank you for joining us for another episode of the Frustrated CEO podcast. You can download this episode's Let's Get Practical from our website at thefrustratedceo.com, as well as you'll find all of our previous episodes and the companion Let's Get Practical for each of those as well. That's all we have. So until next time.